The judge's voice cracked like a whip across the courtroom and ordered her, again, to remove her medals. And the woman standing there, steadying herself on a simple black cane, didn't move an inch.
I've fought for.
People thought she was just another civilian, someone who bought a shiny badge online. Someone pretending N01 in that room knew that the small silver pin on her blazer once glowed under enemy fire, or that she earned it while fighting to keep 6 men alive in a burning aircraft. And then, just when the judge threatened to jail her, the doors exploded open and a general walked in. If stories like this hit you right in the chest, you're in the right place. Tap like, hit subscribe, and share this video with someone who still believes real courage is quiet but unforgettable. Let's dive deeper into the moment a judge tried to strip a hero of her honor until the entire courtroom fell silent. The courtroom felt too small for the tension hanging in the air. A slow, restless murmur rippled across the wooden benches, the kind that rises when people realize they're witnessing something they were never supposed to see. And right at the center of it all stood a woman who refused to move. Noel Davidson, blue blouse, gray blazer, a simple black cane pressed into the floor like an anchor. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't confused. She wasn't even angry, not the way the judge imagined. She was steady, silent, focused. But silence can be misunderstood, especially by a man who mistakes volume for authority. Judge Harold Miller leaned forward on his bench, peering down at her with the sharp impatience of someone who believed he had already won the argument. "Ma'am," he said, drawing out the word like it annoyed him, "I will not ask again. Remove that pin from your blazer." The words echoed against mahogany panels, bouncing off the stiff silence of a room that smelled faintly of floor polish and stale coffee. People shifted on the hard benches, whispering behind their hands. To them, it looked like a simple parking violation hearing. A minor case. A boring morning. Nothing more. But boredom had evaporated the moment the judge raised his voice. Noel didn't break eye contact. Her grip tightened around her cane, her knuckles turning a pale ivory. The judge took that small movement as defiance. He wasn't wrong, but he had no idea what kind of defiance he was dealing with. "This is a courtroom," Judge Miller continued, his tone swelling like he was speaking to a full theater. "And in this courtroom, we maintain order, dignity, and basic respect. I will not tolerate fake medals, political statements, or attempts to influence a ruling." Fake. That word stung more than the tone. Someone in the gallery chuckled under their breath, an uneasy, sycophantic little laugh meant to impress the man in the black robe. Noel didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. She had heard that laugh before, in 100 different rooms, from 100 different people who thought they understood her story better than she did. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet, but not weak. Quiet the way a storm cloud is quiet, heavy, full of something gathering strength. "Your Honor," she said, "this isn't a political item, and it isn't fake." The judge scoffed so loudly the microphones picked it up. "Oh, please. I know what a Silver Star looks like. My father served. I served. I've seen real valor. And it does not look like that." He flicked his hand dismissively at her chest, as if the small, perfectly polished miniature medal didn't matter at all. "Take it off," he snapped. "Right now?" For a moment, Noel simply breathed. Slow, steady, almost surgical in her calm. Nobody in the room saw the battle happening inside her shoulders, the way pain radiated from the nerve damage along her right arm. Nobody knew how much effort it took to stand in one place for longer than 10 minutes. Nobody knew that the cane at her side was not a prop, not dramatics, not an attempt at sympathy, just survival. What they saw was a quiet woman. What they assumed was fragility. What they forgot was that some of the strongest structures in the world look plain from the outside. "I won't remove it," she said. The judge blinked once, sharply, like a man slapped with an outcome he couldn't imagine. "You won't," he repeated. "Or you can't." "I won't," she answered simply. There was no drama in her voice, no challenge, just fact. A line drawn with the gentleness of someone who'd had far worse lines drawn against her before. Judge Miller slammed his palm against the bench, the crack echoing like a starter pistol. "That is enough. You are disrupting a legal proceeding. You are disrespecting this court." Officer Higgins removed the pen. A heavy-set bailiff straightened from the back wall, startled but obedient. His boots clicked against the polished floor as he approached her, his face shifting uncomfortably, as if even he felt something wrong about what he'd been ordered to do. Noel didn't flinch, but something in her eyes changed. Not fear, not hesitation. A sudden, piercing clarity, like someone bracing for impact. "Don't touch me," she said, her tone crisp as folded steel. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a plea. It was a command, one that didn't belong in a small Ohio courtroom. The bailiff froze mid-step. The gallery fell silent. Even the humming lights overhead seemed to pause. The judge sputtered. "Miss Davidson, you are on very thin ice." "You don't understand," she said, shifting her grip on the cane. "That medal is mine." More whispers rolled through the benches. Someone muttered, "She bought online," and another snickered. But their amusement dissolved when Noel's next words cut through the air like a rotor blade slicing fog. "I earned it," she said. For the first time, some heads tilted, some faces softened into doubt. A few people even frowned, trying to piece together her posture, the way she leaned off her right leg, the pale scar that peeked beneath her sleeve when she moved. But the judge wasn't looking. He wasn't observing. He was reacting. "You earned it." His tone dripped disbelief, a thick syrup of condescension that filled the gaps between every word. "Ma'am, please. You are not a combat pilot." Noel's breath hitched. A memory flickered, brief and sharp, the taste of metal in the air, the scream of a failing engine, the weight of someone bleeding out beside her. Her fingers tightened around her cane to stay present. "You're making a mistake," she said softly. "No." Judge Miller fired back. "You are, and I will not have stolen valor in my court. Officer Higgins, handcuff her if she refuses." The bailiff hesitated. That hesitation said more than he realized. He wasn't sure. Something about her didn't fit the judge's assumptions. But Judge Miller didn't see uncertainty, only disobedience. "Do it," he barked. Higgins stepped forward again, regret in his eyes. Noel didn't retreat, didn't bargain, didn't try to convince another man who had already decided who she was. "You're about to arrest a veteran for wearing her own medal," she said firmly. The room inhaled. Nobody exhaled. The judge laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Oh, please," he said. "If you were a real veteran, I would know." And that those 7 careless words set the stage for the moment the entire courtroom would remember for the rest of their lives. Because while the judge demanded obedience, someone in the back row finally recognized her name. A young man slid off the bench, eyes wide, and sprinted out the door with his phone pressed to his ear. The fuse had been lit, and in minutes, the general would arrive. The courtroom slowly dissolved around Noel, not physically, but in the way memory sometimes replaces scenery, without permission. One moment she was standing under fluorescent lights, surrounded by murmuring strangers, and in the next, she was back in the sky, in the cold black air above a mountain range that never forgave mistakes. It always began with sound, not the judge's voice, not the restless whispers. A distant metallic whine, the kind an aircraft engine makes when it knows something's gone terribly wrong. But she blinked hard and forced herself back into the present. She wasn't in a cockpit. She wasn't bleeding through a flight suit. She wasn't gripping a joystick slick with dust and adrenaline. She was in a civilian courtroom, held hostage not by enemy fire, but by ignorance. Yet the memory lingered at the edges of her vision, refusing to fully retreat. 5 years earlier, the helicopter, call sign Dark Horse 26, vibrated like a wounded animal as Noel guided it through the thin mountain air. The Afghan night clung to the windshield, black and heavy, swallowing everything but the faint glimmer of distant tracer rounds. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Ramos, was shouting coordinates, trying to keep the GPS alive as sparks rained from the panel. "We're losing hydraulics." "Noel, we're losing." "I feel it," she said, fighting the shuddering controls. "Hold on." The mission had been simple on paper, an extraction of 6 Rangers pinned down in a narrow valley. But simplicity rarely survived contact with reality. They were already overloaded, the terrain was unfriendly, and the threat level had gone from manageable to impossible in less than a minute. Then the missile hit, not a direct strike. If it had been, that helicopter would have been nothing but a smear on a cliffside. But the near impact sent a wave of metal fragments slicing into the aircraft, shredding hoses and ripping through panels. Something exploded behind her right shoulder. Heat, pain, a crackling alarm screaming in her ears. She tasted blood. Ramos slumped sideways, his voice dying mid-sentence. "Stay with me," she ordered, her tone firm but fraying. She didn't look at the wound. She couldn't afford to. She tightened her grip, ignoring the burn that pulsed down her arm. The stick felt heavier, harder to pull. The bird fought her every inch, but she didn't let go. Night Stalker pilots had a saying, "We own the night, but we pay for it." She paid in nerve damage, paid in scar tissue, paid in memories like this one, haunting her when a judge questioned her reality. Back in the courtroom, she straightened her shoulders, grounding herself. The sound of the past faded, replaced by the creak of benches and the sharp clack of the bailiff's shoes stopping in front of her. "Ma'am, please," he murmured. "Don't make me do this." His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man caught between orders and his gut. But Noel had heard that plea before, not in a courtroom, but in a different kind of chaos. Back to the mountain, back to the cockpit. Her leg throbbed, a sharp bolt of agony. Something hot had torn through muscle. She couldn't waste time wondering what it was. "Dark Horse 26, do you copy?" Static. Then, "Taking fire, Ranger still pinned." The distress call fueled her. She forced the helicopter forward, fighting airflow, fighting gravity, fighting her own body. Ramos moaned beside her. "Just keep breathing," she told him. He didn't answer. The controls sagged. The altitude dropped. Warning lights strobed like panicked heartbeats. A lesser pilot would have aimed for the nearest flat surface and prayed. But Noel wasn't a lesser pilot. She was Night Stalker trained. In the mountains, in darkness, under fire, she found control inside chaos. She rerouted what she could, stabilized what refused to stabilize, and flew manual when everything else failed. When the landing gear hit the ground, it hit hard, but it was a landing, a survivable one. The Rangers sprinted aboard, dragging one another, shouting positions and casualty updates. Noel didn't hear any of it clearly. The ringing in her ears drowned everything out. But she heard one thing. Go, go, go. She lifted off again, just as another enemy team breached the ridge. Bullets sparked across the mountainside. Something inside the helicopter exploded. Ramos fell sideways. She switched to backup controls. Her right arm shook. Her vision blurred. But she did not let go. The flight back was a blur of pain and instinct. When she finally touched down at the FOB, she was the last to exit. She dragged Ramos out herself. Minutes later, the fuel tank exploded behind them, lighting the night sky. Ramos lived. So did every Ranger on board. Noel walked away with a cane, nerve damage, and a medal she never wanted attention for. Back to the courtroom. Higgins hesitated again. He wasn't sure anymore. Something in Noel's eyes looked too battle-worn to fake. Judge Miller hadn't noticed. He was too busy drowning in his own certainty. "Officer," he snapped, "handcuff her." Noel's jaw tightened. Her cane pressed harder into the floor. A tremor crawled up her damaged leg, but she didn't shift her stance. "You think she's pretending?" A voice whispered from the gallery. Another voice followed. "Look at her. Does she look like she bought online?" A third. "She's not shaking. She's standing like someone who's been yelled at before." But the judge heard none of it. He leaned forward like a general ready to issue a final, foolish order. "Remove the medal from her blazer," he repeated, "or I will—" The door at the back opened. Just a crack. The young man who had run out a moment earlier slipped inside again, breathless, eyes wide with urgency. He wasn't alone. Behind him, still in the hall, the shadow of a uniformed figure appeared. Tall, commanding, decorated shoulders gleaming faintly. Noel didn't turn. She didn't need to. A ripple of recognition spread through a few of the veterans in the room, even if they didn't know exactly who approached. The judge continued ranting, unaware he was seconds away from being dwarfed by a truth far bigger than his courtroom. Noel lifted her chin. She didn't smile, didn't smirk. She simply braced herself, because she knew the sound of rescue, whether it arrived in a helicopter or in the footsteps of a man wearing 3 stars. The bailiff hadn't even touched her yet when the wooden doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open with a force that silenced every breath in the room. It wasn't a polite entrance. It wasn't a casual walk-in. It was the kind of entrance that only came from someone who had spent a lifetime walking into chaos and expecting the room to fall in line. Heads snapped toward the noise. Conversations died instantly. Even Judge Miller's rant choked mid-sentence. The air shifted, electric and tight. A uniform stepped through the doorway first. Then another, and another. 2 military police officers entered in perfect sync, their posture sharp, their eyes scanning the courtroom like it was foreign territory. Behind them came a senior enlisted man, his presence heavy, as though he carried 20 years of stories in every step. But the man at the front stopped everything. A tall figure, shoulders squared, medals displayed with surgical precision, 3 distinct stars gleaming on each epaulette. His expression did not belong in a courtroom. It belonged on a battlefield, on a command deck. Anywhere but here. Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne, a man who rarely raised his voice because he rarely needed to. Authority traveled with him like a shadow. He marched straight down the aisle, boots thudding like approaching thunder. Nobody dared move. Not the gallery. Not the clerks. Not even the judge. Especially not the judge. Judge Miller stood, but the movement looked involuntary, like his body panicked before his mind caught up. "Sir, this is a private legal proceeding." The judge stuttered, voice suddenly thin. You cannot just... But General Thorne didn't look at him, not even for a second. He went straight to Noel, right through the small wooden gate, separating the gallery from court floor. The MPs stopped at the boundary, taking rigid positions. The senior enlisted stepped in behind Thorne, but stayed 1 stride back, respecting the moment, guarding it. Noel's grip tightened on her cane. The tremor in her right leg eased, not from relief, but from recognition. She hadn't seen Thorne in years, but some people don't fade. They remain carved into memory, steady, immovable. Thorne halted 2 feet in front of her. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then he clicked his heels together and saluted, a slow, precise, regulation-perfect salute, given in dead silence, watched by a room full of people who didn't understand what they were witnessing. The judge's mouth fell open. The bailiff froze mid-reach, hand hovering in the air like he'd forgotten how arms worked. The gallery erupted in soft gasps. Noel's breath hitched. She shifted her weight, let her cane rest against her hip, and fought against a tremor in her injured arm. Her hand rose, steady as she could make it, returning the salute. Not flawlessly, not smoothly, but correctly. And that was enough. Thorne lowered his hand slowly. "Captain Davidson," he said, voice deep and warm, at ease. She relaxed her stance only slightly, enough to breathe again, enough to stay upright. Then, only then, did Thorne turn toward the judge. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Judge Miller," he said, each syllable controlled, "I received a call that one of my soldiers was being threatened with arrest for wearing the medal she earned." The judge blinked rapidly, color draining from his face. "General, I believe you have been misinformed. This woman is, well, she's impersonating." Thorne's eyes snapped to him, the silence between them sharp enough to cut steel. "She is Captain Noel Davidson, United States Army Night Stalkers 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment." His voice rumbled across the courtroom. "The medal she is wearing is a silver star, the miniature version, as is customary. And the fact that you demanded she remove it is not just inappropriate. It is an embarrassment." A murmur spread across the gallery, like rolling thunder. Someone whispered, "Night Stalkers?" Another whispered, "They're the ones who fly into hell." Judge Miller swallowed hard. "General, this is my courtroom. Then you should run it with the discipline of one." Thorne snapped, the first spark of anger finally surfacing. He reached into his uniform jacket, pulling out a folded document. It was crisp, official, military stamped. He didn't need to read it. He knew it by heart. On August 14th, Thorne began, while conducting a night evacuation under direct hostile fire, Lieutenant Noel Davidson's aircraft was struck by an RPG, critically wounding her co-pilot and disabling the majority of her flight controls. The judge's eyebrows shot upward. A ripple moved across the benches. One woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Thorne continued, stepping closer to the bench, each word hitting like a hammer. Despite a gunshot wound to her leg, severe shrapnel injuries to her arm, and catastrophic hydraulic failure, she manually stabilized a helicopter, landed under fire, and extracted 6 Rangers and her entire crew. The judge stared at Noel, disbelief and shame mixing on his face. Thorne kept going. She was the last off the aircraft, he said, voice tightening, because she dragged her unconscious co-pilot out before the fuel tank exploded. A hush fell across the room, so complete it felt sacred. And for this, Thorne finished, she received a silver star. The judge slowly sank into his chair. He whispered, "I had no idea." "No," Thorne replied coldly. "You didn't want an idea. You wanted to assume." The silence deepened. Noel stared at the floor for a moment, letting the weight of Thorne's words settle. She didn't want to relive that night. She didn't want applause. She wanted fairness. Respect. Nothing more. Thorne softened his tone and turned back to her. "You should never have been put in this position," he said. "Not after what you've done." The judge cleared his throat weakly. "I rescind my order. Captain Davidson, I apologize. I truly—" Noel looked up. Her calm was steady, but her voice carried something quieter, something tired. "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "I'm here for a fair hearing, same as anyone else." Her words landed with more weight than any metal. Higgins, the bailiff, stepped back, head bowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he whispered. "I didn't want to—" She nodded gently. "I know." Thorne turned to the judge again. "This entire proceeding ends now." The judge nodded quickly. "Of course." Case dismissed. The parking citation is voided. But Thorne wasn't done. "On behalf of the United States Army," he said, "I will be filing a formal complaint with the Judicial Oversight Committee." The judge's hands trembled. He looked smaller than he had an hour earlier, small enough to disappear behind the bench if he could. The tension in the room began to ease, not into comfort, but into realization. People in the gallery straightened, some out of respect, some out of shame. The young man who had made the phone call stood tall at the back, eyes bright with pride. He caught Noel's gaze. She offered a faint nod, a silent thank you. Higgins stepped aside, clearing a path. Thorne positioned himself at Noel's side, almost protective. "Captain," he said softly, "let's get you out of here." Noel placed her cane firmly against the floor. Her injured leg trembled once, then steadied. For the first time since the hearing began, she exhaled, slowly, deeply, like a weight had finally rolled off her chest. And together they walked toward the exit. The gallery parted for them, not out of fear, but out of respect. Some people placed their hands over their hearts. Others bowed their heads. A few whispered, "Thank you," as she passed. The judge remained seated, gaze lowered, the echo of his mistake filling the space around him. The courtroom doors opened once more, but this time gently. A veteran left the room. A general walked beside her, and every person present knew they had witnessed something rare. The truth cutting through arrogance, the quiet dignity of earned honor, reclaiming its place. The heavy courtroom doors closed behind Noel with a soft thud, nothing like the explosive entrance that had shaken the room minutes earlier. Outside, the hallway felt wider, calmer, the air brighter and less suffocating. But her heartbeat still thudded in her ears, steady and stubborn, like a drum remembering a rhythm she refused to forget. General Thorne walked beside her, hands clasped behind his back in that familiar command posture. His steps were deliberate, but not rushed. He wasn't escorting her out of danger. He was walking with her, an equal, a colleague, someone whose service had carved deep respect into his bones. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, his voice echoing off the marble walls. Noel nodded, though the ache in her leg whispered otherwise. "I've had worse mornings," she said, allowing a dry smile to tug at her lips. Thorne huffed a small laugh. "I don't doubt it." As they reached the end of the hall, the two MPs paused, waiting for instructions. Thorne gave them a brief nod. They peeled off, heading down another corridor. The senior enlisted man, Sergeant Major Striped Stark against his sleeve, stayed long enough to give Noel a sharp, respectful nod before disappearing after them. Suddenly, the building felt too large, too quiet. Thorne leaned slightly closer. He had no right to treat you like that. Noel didn't respond immediately. She gazed through the glass doors, watching dust float in the sunlight outside. A few people from the courtroom were gathered on the courthouse steps, murmuring to each other, stealing glances inside as if waiting for her to reappear. "He didn't know," she finally said. "People assume. They always have." Thorne's jaw tightened. They should assume less. Noel smirked softly. "You're preaching to the choir, General." He exhaled, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. "Come on, let's get you to your car. I'm not leaving you here to limp off alone." She appreciated the offer, even if she gave him a playful side-eye. "You know I can walk, right?" "I know you will walk," he corrected. "That doesn't mean you should do it alone." Outside, the late morning sun pressed warm and bright against the concrete steps. People shifted aside respectfully as Noel descended, slowly, carefully, her cane clicking against the stone. No one stared in the way they had before. No judgment, just silent acknowledgement. Halfway down, a familiar face stepped forward, the young man who had made the phone call. He looked nervous now, not bold like he'd been when he sprinted out of the courtroom. "Ma'am," he said, voice shaky. I hope it was okay that I called. I recognized your name from an article, and then it didn't feel right to just sit there." Noel paused, leaning subtly against her cane. "What's your name?" "Tyler." "Tyler," she said gently. "You did the right thing." Relief washed over him so visibly that Thorne let out a short, amused breath. Tyler nodded, backing away. "Thank you for your service. And, for not letting that man talk to you like that." Noel didn't answer. She didn't have to. A simple nod was enough. The young man retreated to steps, joining a cluster of onlookers who still looked stunned by the morning's events. Thorne guided her toward the street. A black military SUV idled at the curb, but she slowed before reaching it. "I'll walk," she said. "My car is only a block away." Thorne studied her for a moment. His eyes softened, warmer, more human than most people ever saw in a general. "You sure?" She nodded. "I need the movement. It helps." He understood instantly. Some wounds stiffen if you stop moving, and some memories loosen only when you choose your own path forward. "All right," he said, "but we're filing the complaint, and the entire command knows what happened." "I figured," she replied wryly. "Good." He exhaled through his nose. "He won't get away with it. Not after what you've done for this country." Noel shifted her weight, letting the cane balance her. "I don't need revenge, General." "No," Thorne agreed, "but you deserve justice." With that, he squeezed her shoulder gently, carefully avoiding the nerve-damaged side. Then he stepped back, saluted once more, and climbed into the SUV. It pulled away, leaving a quiet trail of warm exhaust behind. Noel stood for a long moment on the sidewalk, letting everything settle. The courthouse, the judge, the medal, the memories, the strange blend of humiliation and validation. The way her pulse still beat like helicopter blades inside her chest. She breathed. Then she turned and walked, slowly, rhythmically, toward her car. Tap, step, tap, step. Her gait was uneven but purposeful. The kind of walk that told anyone watching, "I'm injured, not broken." By the time she reached her sedan, the tremor in her leg had dulled. She slid inside, closed the door, and leaned her head back for a moment of stillness. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then several times in rapid succession. 12 messages, 2 missed calls, 1 voicemail. She groaned softly. "Oh no, they know." She didn't even have to check the caller ID. She knew exactly who they were. Her old unit. She pressed the speaker button. Sarah's voice blasted through instantly. "Ma'am, please tell me the rumors aren't true. Did a judge seriously try to arrest you for wearing your own medal?" Noel massaged her temple. "Sarah." And then a general kicked down the door, and there were MPs. And the dude tried to, Ma'am, are you okay?" Despite everything, Noel laughed. A real, exhausted, unfiltered laugh. "I'm fine," she said. "Really? You're lying." "I can hear it," Sarah shot back.